Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Buddy the G-Man, released in 1935. It's the 111th in the series and it's directed by Jack King. This short has shown up on a few DVDs here and there, but it's not been restored as of yet. In case you haven't seen this one, and out of all the Buddy shorts, this one is one that you may more likely have seen versus some of the others, as there's no racism in this one, of course. But in case you haven't seen this one, and it is under copyright, so you won't find it on YouTube, unfortunately. But Buddy is a federal agent, and he's told to sneak into the sing-song prison, and he takes his dog, named G-Man. Yeah, okay, sure. We'll just go with that. At the same time, we see a tough bulldog named Machine Gun Mike. And we see what goes on in the prison. Buddy's taking notes with his wonderful fake mustache. After a while, Buddy's made warden and he changes everything in the prison. It's a very bizarre short, but what do you expect from Jack King? Now, this is the final Buddy short, and thank goodness for that. And I've reviewed every single one, and you'll find them all on the channel. For this one, I also have two special guests, one of which is my good friend S.C. MacPeter, and his comments will be amongst my own comments as we'll go through the short from start to finish, and he'll also include some other observations too. Towards the end, my good friend Manny Cruz, the tuner tenor, will go through the music cues, and he'll go through his thoughts on the short, whatever little there may be. So without further ado, first, say hi to S.C. MacPeter.
Hello everyone, this is SC here. We've come a long way, haven't we? We are at the last of the Buddies, Buddy the G-Man, and I'm sure Anthony is very much crying at this news.
Oh yes, the tears are just running down my face. You know what, I'm going to go back and re-review all the Buddy shorts yet again. No, I'm kidding, of course. Honestly, with the exception of maybe one or two, I don't really want to see these again. Unless they may be restored and I can look at some new details, whatever. But the fact remains, these were not the greatest cartoons. There definitely was no proper direction in any of these, as you see all throughout the different shorts with the different directors, the different takes. No one really knew what Buddy was supposed to be. It's just Buddy. It's just a bland character with no real personality. That said, it is part of Looney Tunes history before Tex Avery arrives, and that it's still an interesting history. It's just that the shorts themselves aren't particularly great. But SC has got some interesting observation in regards to some behind-the-scenes stuff that was going on at the studio around this time, along with some opinions in regards to how a short like this would have even been made.
Buddy the G-Man is an interesting cartoon, not because of what happens in it, but because of the circumstances behind its creation. By this point, Jack King was the only director of the Buddy cartoons, although when he began directing the new cast of characters, Tex Avery would join him. Now, there was already a third director, Bugs Hardaway. What happened to him? He was still at the studio. Here is what I think happened, and while this has never been discussed before in any of the history books to my knowledge, I believe this is what the story is. Now, in 1935, very early in the year, I believe that the Schlesinger studio consolidated and created a new story department that included Bugs Hardaway at the lead. And of the early story department, this information comes from Dunn Baxter, there were two different rooms. One was the Kansas City Boys that had Hardaway in it, as well as Jack Miller and at one period Pencil Colvin. A group of younger story artists would include Ted Pierce, Cal Howard once Avery joined the studio, Rich Hogan, and eventually, I believe, Mike Maltese. Now, because of this new room, this is why I also think Tex Avery did not have room for his new unit when he joined the studio. When he joined the studio, they went to the infamous Termite Terrace building that eventually became the name of that main studio once all of the rooms were consolidated and they could fit Avery's unit within. But getting back to the cartoon.
Yes, getting back to the cartoon. So let's take a look at this from start to finish, and SC's comments will be all throughout. So, one thing you'll notice when watching this short is some of the direction is quite stale or stiff. It's kind of weird, and SC will explain what he thinks in just a moment in regards to the way Jack King directed. But we start off with the fact that we're at the Department of Justice and we see Buddy. Apparently he's working for the FBI now, which is, again, so inconsistent. In some shorts, Buddy is a little boy, and in other shorts, he's like a grown man. They definitely did not think any of this out. So here it's just like, you know what, let's just put Buddy in here. But apparently Buddy, the federal agent, is based on Cornbread Avenue in Kansas City, and cornbread is a staple usually associated with Southern diets and similar to things like corn pone and that sort of thing. And of course, Kansas City, Missouri, well, that's a pretty famous city if you know your history of animation. But why 000.5? I don't know. I don't know if that's a reference to anything or if they thought that was supposed to be funny. But anyway, so Buddy opens the letter, and of course, the chief's name is Full of Pep. Ha ha, full of pep. And you even get that order number 173620 and 1/7. I don't know what they were trying to do with that gag, but anyway. And by the way, the title itself, Buddy the G-Man. Now, G-Man is a slang term for government man, so like a federal agent or something like that. So, wow, there's something that actually makes sense in this short. So, yes, that's what the title's referring to, that Buddy is a G-Man, a government man. So, it's all set up that Federal Agent Buddy needs to conduct a secret investigation as to the treatment accorded prisoners by warden at Sing Song Prison. And Sing Song Prison is based off of Sing Sing Prison, which is a real prison that's still operating today. But the next bit is what I call unintentionally funny, because I'm sure they didn't intend us to laugh at this and just how ridiculous it is, but Buddy puts on a fake mustache. Now, do you really think that prisoners being looked at are going to know who this federal agent actually is? It is such a bizarre choice. And just as bizarre, before Buddy leaves the house, he sees a horseshoe, spits on it and throws it, I'm assuming for good luck, but he ends up breaking a mirror instead. In a competent cartoon, that would foreshadow something, so Buddy would later on go through a series of events which is nothing but bad luck because of the broken mirror. Here it just happens and there's no consequence, and this broken mirror bit is never really referred to again. This whole thing wasn't even needed. You could have cut out this whole scene and that's it.
Now that we know there was a story department at Schlesinger's, we now should see that the cartoons were being more thought out, right? Sort of. Jack King's direction was very questionable in terms of this, but we'll get to that in just a moment. First, I want to address that you can sort of tell that by this point the idea that Buddy was going away was already very clear by the fact that, unlike his earlier cartoons that had humans in supporting cast, this one has funny animal characters, suggesting that they had already made the decision to cancel Buddy, that it was already in that point when they went to layouts. So yeah, we have a Buddy cartoon with funny animals, no Cookie. He has his G-Man dog, which I think is a weird joke because isn't Buddy supposed to be the G-Man? I guess they should have just labeled it Watson or Wagston if they wanted to be funny, but that wasn't Jack King's style. He didn't make funny cartoons. But we're seeing that there's a real story behind this, in that instead of just a musical routine, even though there is a little bit of music within this to plot out the whole story, we have a bit of a story that Buddy is a federal agent and he is going to Sing Song Prison, which is based, of course, on the real Sing Sing Prison in New York, which is not that far from me. It's actually across the river. Not directly, but it is sort of across the river from me in New York, and it's a place I certainly don't want to go to. There's a reason why Buddy's investigating it, but we actually have a real story that Buddy is going to investigate this prison and find out if conditions are really bad. But until then, we have some sort of weird scene order where first we see Buddy within this crowd, and he just happens to be in the city right away. I guess he just happens to be the one in the area, which is a little weird. It just cuts immediately, and I'm sure this was a little bit obvious to anyone who watched the cartoon that it was just weirdly paced.
I agree. This whole thing was paced in such a weird way. You have Buddy, he's in his backyard, and he's whispering to his dog for some reason to take him along with him. I don't know why. And what is the point of this dog looking like a Sherlock Holmes type character? I don't get it. Why do that? It's not funny. It just is. So, in any case, and by the way, the dog seems to look like Pluto, which might be foreshadowing Jack King's career over at Disney. But in any case, we get this weird cut where Buddy just bounces over this crowd of people and goes into the prison, and we then see what the commotion's all about.
It's because of Machine Gun Mike. He's being brought to the prison. And I feel like if they wanted to make it work a little bit better, they should have established Machine Gun Mike first, then have Buddy hear this and suddenly hop on, because otherwise, it's sort of like the beginning. Everything just happens in motion.
But what is interesting, and again, a lot of the things that are interesting about this short is not even in the short itself. It's the stuff that's outside. But In terms of voice acting credits, and this comes from Keith Scott's Wonderful Cartoon Voices book, a book that every serious animation collector should have in their library. So you have Jackie Morrow doing the voice of Buddy, and you have Billy Bletcher, and that one should be pretty obvious. Billy Bletcher's voice is quite distinguishable. He does the Warden's voice and Mike's cellmate. He has a question mark on Abe Divinovich for Machine Gun Mike. What interested me the most, though, is that he puts in staff voices. I'm assuming that the staff voices would be that pig and that frog in the beginning, that sailor frog thing. I don't even know what that is. You know, the one that's next to the Miller's Bakery.
That's all the excitement. They're taking Machine Gun Mike to St. Saul's prison.
And just to make sure that there's no misinformation, if you think that that's a reference to Melvin Tubby Millar, he would not arrive at the studio until a few years after this short, so it's definitely nothing to do with him. Could be a reference to another staffer on the payroll, I don't know, but in any case, just wanted to make sure there's no misinformation in regards to that reference. And they're really emphasizing the whole G aspect of this short by having the registration plate or license plate, as you guys say in America, GGGG. Okay, I know these days GG actually has a meaning, but back then it's just a poor attempt to add a joke. Just like how there was a person in the sewer for some reason and the back of the car just blows into his face and he falls back down. There's no real payoff here. Why even do it?
The opening scenes are, again, just a little bit of motion. There isn't a lot of direction, and this was something that Jack Hanna criticized Jack King of at Disney. That Jack King, he would not change anything about the storyboard, and he would direct it as is, which to me included the timing. He would just do very flat timing. There wasn't anything snappy about it. There wasn't anything particularly funny. And it made just a lot of gags just feel bloated, and everything just sort of running like a Model T assembly line. Just everything is given the same emphasis. And it really does affect this middle portion, because when we go through the whole Buddy going through investigating conditions, we have a nice little song segment and some nice character moments between two prisoners that are then silenced.
I guess one minor positive about this short is the name of the warden as Otto B. Kinder. I mean, that in itself isn't ha-ha funny or anything, but it does set up what we would expect from this warden character. The character isn't that great, but at least it's doing something right in this short, I guess. Now, Manny will go through what the song actually is later on in this review, but I do like the song here, and I do like the timing of it here, so again, it's another positive in case you think I'm going to be bagging this short. But we see some graffiti on the actual cell doors here. So we have the Frisco Kid, which is actually a reference to a pulp figure that was around at the time, and I'm Mike, but we've also got a few things here which some are harder to make out, so until they properly restore this, I'll have to do my best here. But we've got Vermin Villa, we've got High Pals for some reason there, and we've got a nice little graffiti there of the warden, so someone's clearly making fun of him there, which is a nice little touch. As for the rest, yeah, I find that's very hard to read, so again, we'll just have to wait for a restoration of this one, which I would say don't hold your breath on one coming anytime soon, of course, but yeah, I still have to read some of these little details. But we got this warden character, he's just angry. Why? I don't know. It's not really well established here.
And there isn't anything particularly funny about the warden and him insisting that they shut up. Especially outside when we see the whole hammer. He is just giving him the hammer, it breaks, and then we see his head come out. But there's no emphasis in the timing or the whole direction. There's just nothing to make a gag that's there funny. And that really does sum up Jack King's direction. He just wasn't making anything funny. He was just putting it through production. And this continued on to his Donald Ducks. Like, I love a lot of those, but they're really carried by really good writing and some nice animation. But my God, he definitely was just directing them just flat. But that's Disney, not Schlesinger. But the other issue I have with this little second act here is that Buddy has no real risk. He is just wandering through the prison. Nobody notices him. He never is confronted by the warden or any guards, nor do any prisoners see him. It's just, why would he bother hiding on the back of a car if he isn't even in that big of risk? So it just feels counterintuitive, and then we see him just write down the typewriter, okay, here's what's going on, and I have some ideas of how to fix this. Not done in any interesting way. We see that it's again just a prison where they're just being constantly thwarted by the warden. Nothing necessarily funny, but it gets the idea across, but they take a little bit too long to establish it, I think. They could have cut down a little bit on a few ideas. Even if there are funny gags, like the prisoner and his girlfriend received like a charity letter. I just realized what he was sent is called a chain letter. Chain letters were printed en masse in 1935. It was a trend. And it was basically just being asked, hey, can you spare me a dime? And it was sort of the precursor to spam mail in a way. They would send these to hundreds of people just asking for a little bit of money. And as they say, a little goes a long way. Some people probably got quite a few dollars off this if they did well, but I'm not sure how big it was, but I do know that this was indeed a real trend in 1935.
So we see the two prisoners, and one has a letter, and of course one has the letter with all those X's on it, which is like, hey, look how much my girl loves me. Well, at least that's what I'm assuming it means anyway. That's why there's all those extra X's. But the other prisoner sounds a little bit like Popeye. It even sounds like he's saying, here's a letter from my goyle. Kind of like what Popeye would say, but in any case.
Not bad. From the goyle, it's this love letter.
But SC already went through the chain letter thing, and yes, that was definitely a prominent scam. And remember, this came out during the Great Depression, so a lot of people were looking for any way to make some money and get some money coming in because jobs were kind of scarce. And yes, unfortunately, that meant resorting to scams like the chain letter scam. Now, because the audio quality is not the best in the print I've got, I have no idea what the other prisoner says before he starts laughing at the fact that, yes, his cellmate has a scam letter.
Taylor.
But if you know what he says, definitely let me know in the comments. But then we got the warder saying, shut up and stop laughing. Again, why? And we then get to the bit that Essie pointed out involving the small hammer, and then the warder saying, get to work, you're giving him the big hammer. The timing in this bit just feels incredibly off, and there's no real punchline here. I guess this must have been funny on the storyboard, and I guess this could be funny if there was someone that maybe tweaked the timing a little bit. And someone like, say, Tex Avery, he could probably make that scene work pretty well, but as it stands, it just doesn't work. And all the while, you have Buddy's character with that stupid fake mustache, which again is funny unintentionally, but in any case, he's sneaking around, and I'm thinking no one's even noticing him sneaking around, but anyway, we'll put that aside. And he's even getting his dog write down some notes at one point as well, so even Buddy's bored of his own little movie, I'm assuming, but in any case, none of these moments are earned. Like, okay, the dog's writing notes. So what? And you have Machine Gun Mike trying to escape using a cannon that just happens to be there. So he loads up his chain ball and the cannon backfires. But no, we just have the warden saying, get back to work. Again, there's nothing really to it. So you have Buddy, he ends up going to this office, which is just empty for some reason, and starts typing a note of the conditions in this prison.
After getting distracted from the story, we get to see that Buddy is now made the warden. What are his qualifications? I really don't know, but he's warden and he's changing things. It's, again, just a weak direction because we don't see any resistance from the prisoners, and they just immediately accept him. We get the nice little bit of them getting to hit the warden on the head with the hammers, which much hurt, but again, there's no real payoff. It just happens. And it's just poor pacing because now we're just seeing him just go around giving ice cream.
And yes, SC is asking the big questions here. What exactly makes Buddy qualified to be warden of a prison? He's a federal agent. How does all that work? And I suppose that makes it unintentionally funny. And some of you might go, look, it's an innocent cartoon. Why are you overthinking these things and so on? Even cartoons where the logic doesn't quite work, if you really think about it, as long as things make sense to a certain degree, like if there is a sense of logic in the short, it's fine. You can overlook certain things, but here, the decisions that were made just do not add up. And they do not ring true. So according to this newspaper, the Daily, I guess it must be a slow news day for Buddy to be made warden, but in any case, so Buddy's made warden, and they've even got these little minor headlines. Buddy gets big new job, local boy makes good, and success. Wow, it really must have been a slow news day. But yeah, the prisoners seem to accept any new warden because there's no resistance here. There's no questioning of, oh, how are you going to make this prison better, Buddy? But in any case, it must have been that bad that they'll be willing to accept anyone. But you have Buddy saying, is everybody happy? Even though he hasn't done anything just yet.
Is everybody happy? Back up the land!
But In any case, that's a reference to a catchphrase that Ted Lewis said, and that was used in a song at one point, wear a hat with a silver lining. And even Bosco and I think Buddy at a few points even said that catchphrase. Why is it used here? I guess someone remembered Ted Lewis at one point. I don't know. But you know, this part of the short is very interesting in a different way than you might think. Buddy makes this whole prison not only humane, as prisons should be. I don't care what you think about how prisons should be. They should be at least humane, okay? They're still people, even though they may have done some bad things. You can't treat them like dirt. You gotta be at least humane to a certain degree. I wouldn't say go as far as what Buddy's doing here, of course. You know, it's not a resort, but hey, you gotta be at least humane. And that's just my opinion on the matter, and I'm not gonna get into that further. But Buddy's really got ahead of the curve here. Why has he gone so much to the opposite of what the previous warden has done? There's no real reason why he's actually doing this. In a different cartoon, what they might have done is they might have had this mean warden who's treating the prisoners like garbage. Buddy comes in, gets rid of the warden in some funny way, and the prisoners are happy that, yeah, we're going to be treated humanely, like normal. But no, Buddy makes this whole thing into a resort. Why? I don't know. None of these little bits are actually funny. Maybe unintentionally some bits, like the fact that you got this cute little woman doing the prisoner's nails for some reason. Why is she there? I don't know. So we have a bellhop type character looking for Machine Gun Mike in a scene that takes a little bit too long, but he finally finds him. You hear off screen a machine gun sound.
Machine Gun Mike!
But it's actually the jackhammer. I didn't realize that they sound the same, but in any case. So apparently the message is that it's an official pardon. Why they would use his alias instead of his actual name in the official pardon, I have not seen many official pardons, but I'm going to assume that they do not look like this. But anyway, that part you can sort of get away with, right? And hands cup. Oh boy. All right. Sure, maybe that's going a bit too far. But in any case, he gets an official pardon. And I suppose the twist here is that the prison is now so good that you don't want to go out to the real world. And sure enough, that's what happens here. We see that the front of the prison is still open, which shows just how loose, I suppose, Buddy's running things there. And everyone's running in, wanting to stay at this prison. One person even yells out, hey, everyone, Buddy's now warden here, as though Buddy's some big celebrity all of a sudden.
Come on, fellas! Buddy's warden now!
I mean, I don't know how many FBI agents / wardens you know. That's very popular, but in any case, Buddy shuts the door, puts a thing saying no vacancies, as those prisoners now a hotel or resort. Such a bizarre ending, isn't it? Although people watching this back in 1935 would have sort of gotten maybe a bit more humor out of this one because they were going through the Great Depression at the time. And sure enough, yeah, any place, even a prison, if it's better than the outside world, that would be the better option to take. So there is that, I guess. But boy, did this ending not make much sense at all.
And I guess while this cartoon looked good on the storyboard, Jack King's direction just really hurt what could have been a good idea. And I think that goes with many of the cartoons he did, but he also would just accept anything, I think. So you get sort of ideas that shouldn't have been Schlesinger cartoons like Fish Tales or even Shanghai Shipmates, and he was doing those, but he really was not a director. He was just really putting these through production with flat timing, and just as the board was, he put no voice of his own. Except maybe in just the really comic book look in them. I don't know, Jack King just didn't have what it took to be a director, yet he was one. I guess his long-term experience as an artist and being able to put things through production, I guess on time and on budget, made him the qualified choice, but I could see why he left the studio, because as soon as Avery joined, I think they could tell immediately, yeah, Jack King's old news, at least Freeling. Well, Freeling was a really good director. I'll get into this in another short, but I think Freeling was really ahead of the curve. And he was making his cartoons funnier, but he still had to fit the Merry Melodies mandate. Once Avery created the freedom to do that sort of cutting and timing in the black and white Looney Tunes that nobody was paying as much attention to compared to the Merry Melodies, you can see that Freeling was more than glad to go on that train, especially because in shorts like The Country Mouse and Into Your Dance, you could see that he wanted to do sharper timing and snappier gags, but I guess just because of the Merry Melodies mandate and how they were expected to be seen by audiences, he couldn't do that for the production, but he was a good director this early on. But I'm getting distracted. Jack King didn't have what it was to be a first Freeling or a Tex Avery, and I think Leon Schlesinger could tell really quickly, and as soon as he leaves and Frank Tashlin takes his place, it really becomes the Looney Tunes that we know. But until then, we had this okayish cartoon, but you can tell, again, that it's at odds and that you're really, really glad that Tex Avery came to the studio, because I don't even think Beans would have made it, because while I get the idea that Schlesinger and Freleng thought Beans would be the right character because he was their Mickey Mouse type, Avery, seeing that Porky was his own character and that it wasn't another Mickey Mouse character and that they could play with a real personality and that they could do real character moments, that was a game changer, and I'm really glad that it happened. But thanks for listening to me, and hopefully Anthony has a decent time editing this. See you all!
Thank you, SC. And now my good friend Manny Cruz, the 2D tenor, is going to discuss the musical references in this short. And again, as I mentioned before, he's going to give his opinions of this short, which is not really that much, but I guess he felt obligated he had to do at least one Buddy short. In any case, take it away, Manny.
Hi, everyone. This is Manny Cruz, the 2D tenor, coming at you with the latest edition of It's Time for Manny's Music Time with music trivia for you today. Bump! For the 1935 Looney Tune cartoon, Buddy the G-Man, directed by Jack King, with musical direction by Norman Spencer. So I try to stick to merry melodies for the Manny's Music Time segment on Anthony's channel, but for some reason I insisted, let me record at least one Buddy cartoon, because I never had the opportunity to come on any of the Bosco cartoons. I was actually hoping to come on for Bosco in Person, which is my personal favorite short from Bosco, and also a great one for music, but didn't get around to it. Maybe in the future I might record something separate. But either because I am dedicated to the cause or a glutton for punishment, I said, let me do at least one Buddy cartoon. So I saw Buddy the G-Man years ago, probably about 5-6 years ago, when I started watching all the Warner Brothers shorts in chronological order. And I remember next to nothing from this one. So the more I talk about how bland this cartoon is we're going to be here a while. But then again, bland and Buddy, those two words are synonymous with each other. So there's not a lot to talk about musically, but let's talk about it, because again, I insisted on that doing at least one Buddy cartoon. So I think just for that, I think this counts as like jury duty, or I don't know. I guess I don't have to pay my taxes for the next few years. I guess that counts because I'm suffering through a Buddy cartoon just for you people. All right. So the cartoon starts off with Beauty and the Beast, the Looney Tunes theme song. I do want to talk about that one a little more in depth in a future commentary, preferably a Porky Pig one as opposed to Buddy, because, well, the Buddy series is almost ending, and yeah, I'd rather do it on a Porky Pig cartoon. So, Beauty and the Beast, you hear during opening titles. The Looney Tunes intro. That's because I know some nerd online is like, well, technically, that's not the opening. You know what I mean. So, during the Looney Tunes sequence, blah, 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 blah. And then, during the opening titles, are you happy now? You hear the song Lulu's Back in Town by Al Dubin and Harry Warren. Actually, I meant to say Harry Warren and Al Dubin, because Harry Warren wrote the music and Al Dubin wrote the lyrics. And I always say they're like the Paul McCartney and John Lennon of the Warner Brothers cartoons. A lot of their music is being used throughout the history of the shorts. If you want to learn more about Harry Warren and Al Dubin, please check out some of the older commentaries where I go more in depth about the two of them. You're going to hear their names continue to pop up. It doesn't matter if it's Bernard Brown or Norman Spencer or Frank Marsalis or especially Carl Stalling. You're going to hear their music throughout Warner Brothers history. So Lulu's Back in Town, like I said, you hear it during the opening credits. And you also hear it later on in the cartoon where some of the prisoners start singing it just before the warden starts shouting at them. And you'll hear it here and there throughout the cartoon. So this is like the theme song of this particular short. They change some of the lyrics and they actually do say Lulu's Back in Town at one point.
Gotta get my own tuxedo pressed. Gotta sew a button on my vest. 'Cause tonight I've gotta look my best. Lulu's back in town. Gotta get a half a buck somewhere. Gotta shine my shoes and see my I'll stop her yelling. Myself a boot in ya. Lulu's back in town. You can quiet on my bed. Quiet! I ain't coming home until the fall, and I might not get back home at all, 'cause Buddy's wouldn't know.
I was listening to a really, really neat version of it done by Fats Waller, which was recorded in the same year as this cartoon, 1935. And speaking of which, this song originally comes from a 1935 Warner's feature called Broadway Gondolier, and the song was originally sung by Dick Powell, another name that was huge during this time, and he premiered a lot of songs that were later used in Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. So the next song that you hear in this short is called She's a Latin from Manhattan, once again by Warren and Dubin. And I listened to the version done by Al Jolson. So the song comes from another feature from 1935, Go Into Your Dance. And I did a previous Manny's Music Time segment on Into Your Dance, the Merry Melody cartoon that featured the same song. That's the title of the film. And Latin from Manhattan, you hear some Latin grooves. I mean, some of the lyrics refer to Cuba and Havana. I'm Cuban American. When this song was recorded, my grandparents were still living in Cuba at the time. But, a little Latin flavor to it. My fellow Latinos out there, if you're listening, who I'm actually recording this the day before I traveled to Puerto Rico. I'm recording this December 28th, 2024, so can't wait to go to Puerto Rico, where my mother was born. So I'm definitely a Latin, but I'm not from Manhattan. But I live close to New York City, so I guess that counts. I mean, my father, he's Latin, and he was born in Manhattan. But this song was written about little under 20 years before my father was born. So yeah, anyway, I digress. Yeah, see, there's not much to talk about with this cartoon. So this song, She's a Latin from Manhattan, you hear it when the two prisoners, you have Machine Gun Mike. I kept resisting the urge to think of him as Machine Gun Kelly, even though I don't care for his music, whatever. I'm jumping ahead, decades in the future. Machine Gun Kelly. No, talking about Machine Gun Mike and him and the guy next to him in the prison, the other guy with a really gravelly voice. I like that really rough voice, whoever's doing that one. But the guy opens up the letter. He has a letter from his sweetheart, and that's when you hear this song.
Get a load of this.
And last but not least, you have the traditional English nursery rhyme. London Bridge is falling down. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. I learned it as a kid. I played the game where you interlock your hands with your classmates and the other people go underneath it, and then London Bridge collapses. And you hear this song briefly during the scene where you have one of the prisoners chiseling away at a rock, and the warden comes and starts screaming at him, get to work, with a little eensy-weensy hammer. And
Get to work! Get to work!
yeah, it is what it is. I mean, for the song London Bridge, as I said, it's a traditional English nursery rhyme. I bet a lot of us growing up sang that song at one point in school. Its origins date back to around the 17th century or the 18th century, depending on where you read. The lyrics, I think, the ones that we're familiar with, were printed sometime in the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. And for the London Bridge itself, there was an actual London Bridge that connected people in England, London, over the Thames River. And the London Bridge was damaged structurally in 1633, and it got burned again in 1666. And then it had to be repaired, and eventually it was replaced in the 19th century in 1831. And then that one was replaced again in 1972. And also with the lyrics of the song and the history of it, some people say it has a little bit of a more morbid meaning to it. Some really creepy stuff. I'm not going to go too much into detail about it. Not that I don't want to talk about it, but it's, you do your own research, and plus, I want to keep this commentary short and sweet. And look, I am keeping it short and sweet. Hooray! So that's pretty much to say for this cartoon. I mean, it's a buddy short. It's a buddy short. I mean, it's not really much to say. I mean, it's kind of interesting, though, looking at this cartoon made nearly 90 years ago, and we're about to hit 2025, so it is nearly 90 years ago, but just seeing the ending with the whole prison reform, and I'm not going to go into that because that's a whole nother topic for another day, but seeing Buddy coming in and being reforming the prison, trying to change the way the warden was doing things. And I also think of it from the lens of the Great Depression, where at the end of the cartoon, Buddy treats the people and the prisoners a lot more humanely than the warden, and the people that are not in prison are like, hey, I hear Buddy's running the show now, and it's a lot better than being out here. So that says a lot about, life during the Great Depression. But I don't want to dig any further because, again, I want to keep this short and sweet. And plus, I don't feel that I've done sufficient research to talk about that at this time. So thanks for listening to my commentary. For Buddy the G-Man, it's always fun to come on here and talk. Maybe I should have done more Buddy cut. No, I'm just kidding. I'm fine. I'm just doing one. I met my quota. So thanks for listening, everyone. Please follow me on social media at the Toony Tenor, TheToonyTenor, for my latest updates in my life as a musician and as a cartoon nerd. I just did a ton of singing during Christmas, and I actually sang 3 times earlier today, and I sing another 3 times tomorrow before I go to Puerto Rico. And maybe I'll be the Latin from Manhattan, but I bet I won't be as pretty as the lady in that original song. So, thanks again. Talk to you soon, and that's all, folks.
Thank you, Manny. So, we've reached the end of an era, the final Buddy short. And if you've been watching all these reviews, is it any wonder why this character never took off? I already mentioned this before, so I'm going to mention it one final time. He was not an interesting character. The different directors had no idea what to do with him, and while there were some interesting concepts here and there, it just didn't work. It just didn't click, and the audiences would have responded in kind because, unlike Bosco, who actually was popular, believe it or not, he actually was successful to a degree, but he just never took off, and I guess they wanted to try and do a Bosco-type character, except they just made him, white and more blander. Say what you want about Bosco, at least he was entertaining to a certain degree, but Buddy, obviously not. So what happens from here? Well, they try a new character, and his name is, well, not Porky, actually Beans. That's right, they actually put all their stock on Beans being the next major star, and their hopes were riding on him, but as we all know, it wasn't Beans that took off, it was a certain other Porky type character, if you get my meaning. But we'll go through those as we go through the next few Looney Tunes shorts. As for this short, this shows just how far Jack King really fell. Compare this short to Buddy's Bearcats, and I know I make a lot of jokes about Buddy's Bearcats being the greatest cartoon of all time. It's a joke, okay? And I'll explain why in that review, why I always refer to it. But compare Jack King's direction in Buddy's Bearcats to this one. So in the span of those few years, it's as though he had all of the enthusiasm just sucked right out of him. Because if you look at this short and the previous Buddy before this one, Buddy Steps Out, there's just no energy. It's just like Jack King going, you know what, I'm not going to put in any more effort. I'm just going to do the minimal required and just move on. It sounds as though maybe he wasn't happy at work, and if that's the case, then yeah, it definitely shows here. Now that's information that's lost to time, this is just speculation, but you can definitely see that by this point, the energy's gone, there's no weird angles, and just no energy whatsoever. In any case, what would I rate this short? It's not particularly great, there's a few funny bits here and there, and I do like certain bits of animation, but this one, again, it's just weird, so this one gets 4 out of 10. It's okay. It's not the greatest, but it's one that I would only revisit when they properly restore it, just so I can read those markers outside the jail cell, but in any case, that'll do it for this review. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
Come on, fellas! Buddy's Gordon now!